Hi, I'm Julie Burns, owner of Sport Fuel and Eat Like the Pros, an organic meal delivery service. I'm a sports nutritionist for the Chicago Blackhawks, as well as other professional athletes, including Chicago Bulls, Chicago Bears, and Chicago White Sox players. Today's pro tip is real food for real athletes and sustained energy. The reason we're talking about that today is for several decades, we were taught as sports nutritionists, including myself, that the foods that athletes need to focus on are high carbohydrate, including breads, cereals, grains, and starches. In fact, several nutritionists today are still touting that diet, despite the fact that that diet promotes fat gain, inflammation, and actually accelerates aging. So what happens when you eat a high carbohydrate diet and you don't eat enough fat and you don't eat enough protein? Well, basically, insulin is your pro-storage fat hormone. So if your insulin levels are high, you basically have fat that's trapped inside your body that cannot be used during exercise for fuel. And so what we want to do is we want to change that ratio. We want to keep insulin at a sustained level, and we want to increase the other side of the equation from insulin, which is glucagon. That's the opposing hormone. And you can do that with your diet. So you don't need to worry about remembering insulin or glucagon. All you need to remember is eat those high protein foods that contain animal fat. It's good for you, believe it or not. We're going to talk more about that. And restrict the number of processed carbs and ideally reduce those altogether in sugars. And your diet will be rich in minerals, fat, and protein, which is what you need to perform at your best. So real foods for real performance and sustained energy are not what you think. They're not pasta, cereal, and rice. We can have those in small amounts, but what the focus of the diet has to be is, as we can see here, animal foods. Okay, now any old beef jerky won't do though. This jerky, as you can see, is uncured beef, and the animals actually ate grass. So when you have a big old steak or some jerky from another store, you're basically going to be consuming a lot of chemicals and the wrong type of fat. So there's different types of fat, and this particular jerky and other beef, the animals are grass-fed and pastured. Extremely important. Ideally, it would also be organic. Other types of fats, good old butter. Okay. Butter was shunned and replaced with margarine, and it basically has contributed to lots of heart disease and inflammation, so we need to focus on butter over margarine. Olive oil, extra virgin olive oil, and believe it or not, coconut oil. This is one of my secret weapons that I use for weight loss, and it's a real food. It helps with cardiovascular disease and actually dementia too, believe it or not. But athletes love this because it's 90% saturated, but it's a special type of saturated fat. It's called MCT, medium chain triglycerides. And these particular fats are burned for energy really quickly, and they're not stored as readily as body fat. So we're looking at protein, healthy fats, and also we have some cod liver oil here, good old-fashioned cod liver oil. Other fats that would be really good for you would be nuts and seeds. But again, not just any old nut and seed. We want to soak these nuts and ideally sprout them so that the minerals are highly available and they're not hard on your digestion. And another really great energy booster is unrefined sea salt. And this is a good brand, but there's also the Himalayan and Hawaiian sea salt. These are loaded with trace minerals. So you get your trace minerals from real food, your fruits, your vegetables, and such. But as an athlete and an active person, you lose a lot of salt and you lose your minerals. And we want to replace that. We don't want to use regular salt, so we're going to fill all your salt shakers up, and I even have athletes that I work with travel with their salt. So every time they're hopping on a plane, they're not using the salt shaker, they're using ideally their Celtic sea salt or any type of refined sea salt. The last thing I want to point out here is a food item that's really kind of gone by the wayside and is coming back because more and more people suffer from poor digestion. And this is basically fermented vegetables. And so we used to see these a lot in the diets of people, and they would be served prior to meals. You have pickles and deli trays and such. But the fermented vegetables are very much available the nutrients are very much available because they're soaked in an acid. And so they're good for digestion. They also support the immune system because they're loaded with beneficial bacteria. So just to summarize, in terms of the pro tip for today, real food for real athletes, real performance, and sustained energy, it is protein from really clean sources, Okay, animal products, animal fats, animal proteins, including our butter, our grass-fed, and our pastured meats. It's also really healthy fats such as coconut oil, some olive oil, ground nuts and seeds. Also controlled amounts of fruits. People say, oh, aren't fruits so healthy? Fruits are good for you, but if you're trying to lean out and you want to keep those insulin levels under control, you're better off focusing on your vegetables. What about starches? Well, starches can be okay, but we don't want them to be processed and we want them to be properly soaked. So for example, if you were going to have a cornmeal or so, believe it or not, just like your grandmother used to do, you'd want to soak it in some buttermilk. So carbohydrates are not the main focus. It's the protein, the healthy fat, the good, clean sources that will basically allow you to have the sustained energy, real performance for real athletes. Thank you very much.